All right, so get this. Rabies, right? It's been around like forever. I mean, we're talking ancient Egypt, and, back then people actually thought it was like a curse from the gods. Pretty wild, huh?
It is fascinating, how a disease that's been around for centuries is still a concern today.
Totally, and that's why we're doing this deep dive today. You sent us, this information about rabies, and I think you really want to get a clear understanding of the risks and symptoms, and how to stay safe, all that.
Absolutely.
So let's just jump right in. What exactly is rabies?
Well, rabies is a viral disease. It attacks the central nervous system of mammals, and yes, that includes us.
Let's do it, yeah.
And it's serious. Once symptoms appear, it's almost always fatal.
That's definitely not something to mess around with. Now, the information you sent us mentions that there are different strains of rabies, right? And some are like way more dangerous than others.
That's right. The strain depends on the animal carrying the virus. Some strains have a shorter incubation period, meaning symptoms show up faster, making them even more dangerous.
So no matter what, if you think you've been exposed, gotta take it seriously. Speaking of symptoms, the material you shared covers both dogs and humans. Handy, right?
It is.
What should we be looking out for in our furry friends?
In dogs, you might see some sudden behavioral changes. They could become unusually aggressive or even strangely shy and withdrawn.
Yeah, so basically any behavior that seems out of character for your pet could be like a red flag.
Exactly. You also want to watch for excessive drooling, difficulty swallowing, and any kind of muscle spasms or paralysis. In later stages, there can be convulsions and coma.
Oh man, that's heartbreaking. And I was surprised to learn that rabid dogs don't always, foam at the mouth and act all crazy aggressive, right? Like some might even seem unusually calm and disoriented.
Right, that's one of the reasons why rabies can be so tricky to diagnose early on. It doesn't always fit that stereotype we see in movies.
Doesn't fit the stereotype.
Yeah.
So what about us humans? What kind of symptoms should send us running to the doctor?
Well, it often starts with flu-like symptoms. Fever, headache, maybe some tingling or numbness around the bite. But then, it can progress to muscle spasms, delirium, even hydrophobia, which is a fear of water.
Oh man, that's terrifying. It sounds like it can escalate really quickly.
It can, which is why immediate medical attention after any potential exposure is absolutely crucial.
No kidding. So we know bites are the main way rabies is spread, but the information you mentioned scratches and even just contact with, like saliva, could be enough. That seems a little, far-fetched, doesn't it?
Not really. Rabies is actually present in the saliva of infected animals. And any contact with an open wound or mucous membrane can be risky. It's like a microscopic doorway for the virus to enter your body.
Wow, I never thought of it that way. So even a tiny scratch could be a problem.
It's definitely possible. And to make matters more complicated, the main carriers of rabies in the US aren't just wild animals. Unvaccinated pets can carry it too.
Oh, that's a good point. It's easy to assume our cuddly companions are safe, but they can be vulnerable too. Speaking of vulnerable, what about bats? They seem to be all over the news lately when it comes to rabies.
Bats are a major concern. They're one of the most common carriers of rabies in the US, and their bites can be so tiny you might not even notice them.
Yeah, that's pretty unsettling. So I'm guessing it's safe to say we should just avoid any contact with potentially infected animals.
Absolutely. Even if an animal seems friendly or in need of help, resist the urge to touch it. No petting, no feeding, and definitely no trying to rescue them yourself. Call animal control or a wildlife rescue organization if you encounter a sick or injured animal.
Okay, that makes sense. Better to be safe than sorry, especially when it comes to a deadly disease. So how do we protect ourselves? Is it just about, avoiding contact?
Avoiding contact is definitely key. But the good news is that rabies is 100% preventable through vaccination. And in most U.S. states, rabies vaccination for pets is actually required by law.
That makes a lot of sense. Protecting our pets protects us too. So let's say the worst happens and someone does get bitten. What's the first thing they should do?
Immediately wash the wound with soap and water for at least 10 minutes. And I mean really scrub it. This helps flush out as much of the virus as possible.
Soap and water, 10 minutes. Got it. What happens next?
The next step is crucial. Seek immediate medical attention. Don't wait to see if symptoms develop.
And while you're at it, report the bite to your local health authorities, right?
Exactly. This helps them track potential outbreaks and take steps to protect the community.
Now, I'm curious about the animal that did the biting. Should we try to, catch it for testing?
Ideally, if it can be done safely, the animal should be observed for at least 10 days. This helps determine if post-exposure treatment is necessary for the person who is bitten.
This raises an interesting question. Some people argue that the observation period for potentially rabid animals is cruel. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a valid concern, and it highlights the ethical dilemma surrounding rabies prevention. While observation can be stressful for the animal, it also provides valuable information that can guide treatment decisions and potentially save human lives.
It's like a complex issue with no easy answers.
Exactly. It's about weighing the risks and benefits and striving for the most humane approach possible.
Okay, so let's talk about this post-exposure treatment. What does that actually involve?
It typically includes a series of rabies vaccinations and sometimes something called rabies immune globulin. This helps boost the body's immune response and fight off the virus.
Can you explain rabies immune globulin a little more? What exactly is it?
Think of it as a turbocharged dose of antibodies specifically targeted at the rabies virus. It gives your immune system a head start in fighting off the infection.
So it's like giving your body's defenses an extra boost.
Precisely. And it's most effective when administered soon after exposure, which is why seeking immediate medical attention is so critical.
Time is of the essence, it seems.
It really is. Absolutely. Every minute counts when it comes to rabies.
That's a good reminder that even like a minor scratch from a bat or, just a playful nip from a raccoon shouldn't be ignored.
Exactly. Never underestimate the potential risk, no matter how small the exposure may seem.
So we've covered the basics of what rabies is and how it's spread and what to do if you think you've been exposed. But I'm curious about the global impact of rabies. The information you said mentioned that it's still a major problem in lots of parts of the world, right?
That's right. While rabies has been largely controlled in developed countries like the U.S., thanks to vaccination and animal control programs, it's still a significant public health issue in many developing countries, particularly in Asia and Africa.
What are the main factors contributing to, the higher rabies rates in those regions?
A combination of factors, really. Limited access to health care, a lack of widespread vaccination programs for both humans and animals, and larger populations of stray dogs all play a role.
It sounds like a complex challenge with no easy solutions.
It definitely is. But there are organizations working tirelessly to address the issue. Mass dog vaccination campaigns, public education initiatives, and improved access to post-exposure treatment are all making a difference.
That's encouraging to hear. Sounds like a multi-pronged approach is needed to make a real impact. But even with all the information and prevention measures out there, I imagine receiving a rabies diagnosis must be, absolutely terrifying. What's the psychological impact of facing such a deadly disease?
You're right, it can be incredibly traumatic. The knowledge that rabies is almost always fatal, coupled with the often gruesome symptoms, can have a devastating emotional and psychological impact on individuals and their families.
Yeah, that must be incredibly difficult to process. Is there any kind of support available for people facing this diagnosis?
Fortunately, there are resources. Palliative care teams focus on pain management and providing comfort and emotional support during the final stages of the illness.
That sounds so important to have that kind of compassionate care during such a challenging time.
Absolutely. And mental health professionals, like therapists and counselors, can also play a vital role. They can help patients process their emotions, manage anxiety, and find meaning in the face of a terminal illness.
It's good to know that there is support available to help people navigate such a difficult experience.
Yeah.
Now, I want to shift gears a bit and talk about the history of rabies. You mentioned earlier that it's been around for centuries, and I'm curious to learn more about how people understood and dealt with this disease before modern medicine.
It's a fascinating journey through time. Rabies has plagued humanity for millennia. We find records of rabies outbreaks dating back to ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt. Back then, before the discovery of viruses, rabies was shrouded in mystery and fear.
I bet. Did they attribute it to supernatural forces?
Absolutely. Rabies was often seen as a curse from the gods, a form of demonic possession or punishment for wrongdoing. People resorted to all sorts of superstitious remedies and religious rituals to ward off the disease.
That's pretty wild to think about how, our understanding of disease has evolved over time. So when did the scientific breakthrough start to happen? When was the rabies vaccine discovered?
The first successful rabies vaccine was a truly groundbreaking achievement. It was developed by Louis Pasteur and his colleagues in 1885.
Wow, that's amazing. Can you tell us a bit more about how Pasteur's vaccine worked? It seems so revolutionary for its time.
Pasteur's approach was ingenious. He created a weakened form of the rabies virus by repeatedly passing it through rabbits. When injected into a person, this weakened virus triggered an immune response without causing the actual disease.
Incredible to think that that such a simple concept has had such a profound impact on public health. We've come a long way from attributing rabies to evil spirits to having an effective vaccine that can prevent it.
It really highlights the power of scientific inquiry and the dedication of those who strive to improve human health.
Speaking of human health, the material you shared didn't go into much detail about how the rabies virus actually attacks the central nervous system. Can you, shed some light on that process?
Sure. It all starts with a bite from an infected animal. The rabies virus enters the body through the saliva and begins to multiply in the muscle tissue near the bite site. From there, it travels through the nerves, gradually making its way to the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord.
That sounds, oh man, sounds terrifying. What happens once the virus reaches the brain?
Once the virus invades the brain, it starts to cause inflammation and damage to the nerve cells. This disrupts the brain's ability to function properly, leading to the classic rabies symptoms we've discussed: behavioral changes, aggression, paralysis, and ultimately death.
So it's not just a physical attack, but a neurological one as well.
Exactly. Rabies essentially hijacks the brain, causing a cascade of neurological dysfunction that's ultimately fatal.
That's a sobering thought. It really underscores the importance of taking rabies seriously and seeking immediate medical attention after any potential exposure.
I couldn't agree more. Early intervention is key. The sooner post-exposure prophylaxis is started, the better the chances of preventing the virus from reaching the brain and causing irreversible damage.
We've talked a lot about the serious side of rabies, but I want to explore something a bit lighter for a moment. Its portrayal in popular culture. The information you sent touched on how rabies has inspired countless stories, movies, even songs. What do you think makes rabies such a compelling subject for creative expression?
That's an interesting observation. I think rabies has captured our imaginations for centuries because it taps into some primal fears about disease, animalistic behavior, and loss of control.
The image of a rabid animal foaming at the mouth and acting with uncontrolled aggression is certainly a powerful one.
It is. And because rabies can transform seemingly harmless creatures into dangerous threats, it creates a sense of unease and distrust in our surroundings. It blurs the lines between the familiar and the unknown.
You're right. It makes us question the safety of even the most mundane encounters with animals.
Think about classic horror films like Old Yeller and Cujo, where rabies plays a central role in creating suspense and terror. And let's not forget about the countless zombie movies and TV shows where, a rabies-like virus transforms humans into flesh-eating monsters.
Those are great examples. Rabies seems to have become a potent symbol for our anxieties about contagion, societal collapse, and the fragility of human civilization.
Exactly. Even in the realm of fiction, rabies serves as a cautionary tale.
Right.
About the power of nature and the importance of vigilance.
I'd say that's a good takeaway from our deep dive so far. Vigilance is key.
I agree. Awareness, prevention, and a healthy respect for the boundaries between ourselves and the animal world are crucial for staying safe.
What we've been talking about, all this rabies stuff, something you mentioned earlier really stuck with me. It was about, how even a seemingly harmless encounter with an animal could be risky. It made me think about this one time. I was hiking with my dog, a few years back, and we came across this group of raccoons. And my dog, he's a curious guy, so he wanted to go say hello.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I was like,
that must have been a bit nerve-wracking.
It was, especially knowing that, raccoons are common carriers of rabies.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, my dog is up to date on all his vaccinations. But it was definitely a reminder to be cautious.
Yeah, it's easy to forget about those risks when you're out enjoying nature, but vigilance is key. You never know what you might encounter.
You really don't.
Yeah.
So for all of you listening out there, knowing that even seemingly minor contact, right, can transmit rabies, how might this change your approach to, interacting with unfamiliar animals?
That's a great question to consider. It might mean resisting the urge to pet that stray cat you come across, or keeping a safer distance when you're, observing wildlife. It's all about respecting boundaries and prioritizing safety.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect note to end on. We've explored the science, the history, the cultural impact. You even shared a few personal anecdotes, all about rabies.
It has been a fascinating deep dive, and I really hope you've gained a better understanding of this complex disease and the importance of prevention.
We've covered a lot of ground. from the ancient myths surrounding rabies to the groundbreaking discovery of the vaccine.
And we've learned that while rabies is, a serious threat, it doesn't have to be a death sentence. By taking simple precautions like vaccinating our pets, avoiding contact with wildlife, and seeking immediate medical attention if bitten, we can effectively protect ourselves and our communities.
Well said. If this conversation has sparked your curiosity, we encourage you to learn more about rabies prevention resources in your local area.
Knowledge is power, and in this case, it could be life-saving. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of rabies. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe out there.